There's something that happens in Virgo that no other sign of the zodiac experiences in the same way. A kind of vigilance that never completely shuts off, that analyzes what was said hours after the conversation ended, that mentally redoes work that was already done, that adjusts, corrects, revises, not out of simple insecurity, but out of an internal demand that seems to exist independently of will, as if there were a standard that needs to be met before anything can, in fact, be done. For years, Virgo learned to call this a flaw. But what if this standard, this compulsion for precision that no one asked for, was exactly what the universe was expecting you to operate on? What if your greatest source of exhaustion was, at the same time, your greatest contribution to a cycle you didn't even know you were in? On May 9th and 10th, 2026, a specific cosmic window opens for Virgo. And what this window reveals is disturbing in a good way, the kind of disturbance that reorganizes how you see yourself, not the kind that throws you off balance. Because what will be revealed is that everything you've carried these past 20 years, every pattern you judged as weakness, every sacrifice you normalized, every night the pattern was maintained when it would have been easier to let go, has been recorded. It has been accounted for. Line by line, with the precision that only the universe has when it's truly doing the math. And the balance of that account is not what you imagine. Keep watching. What follows is no longer an astrological prediction. It's the map of something you've already lived, and that will finally have a name. Something strange happens when you say the word karma to someone born under the sign of Virgo. There's a pause. A slight hesitation before the response, as if the body knows something that the mind is still trying to put into words. Because Virgo has a relationship with karma unlike any other sign. It's not fear, it's not blind faith, it's something closer to recognition. As if Virgo knew deep down that there was always an open account, that something was being silently recorded. That at some point, the universe would look at all of that and say, noted. The problem is that no one has ever explained exactly what was being recorded. Karma, for most people, is punishment. It's the universe giving you back what you did wrong. It's a cosmic, automatic, impersonal correction. And when things fall apart, when the relationship ends, when the job slips away, when health betrays, it's easy to think you're paying for something you might not even remember doing. But what if karma wasn't punishment? What if karma were simply accounting? Think of it this way, an account that's been left open, with inflows and outflows, with deposits you made without realizing you were making them, with interest that silently accumulated over years while you were too busy trying to be enough to notice. Virgo has had this account open for a long time, and the closing date is now. But before we get to May 9th and 10th, 2026, before we talk about what happens when this account closes, we need to understand what was deposited into it, what Virgo put there over 20 years, because that's what most people never manage to see from the outside. 20 years is enough time for many things, to start over from scratch, to lose what was built, to try again with slightly more care, slightly more precision, slightly less expectation. 20 years is a complete cycle of maturation, the kind Saturn imposes, not the kind you choose. And Virgo went through this cycle in a very specific way, not with drama, not with visible collapse, but on the inside. In the silent adjustments, in the nights reviewing what was said and what should have been said, in the times it was left behind because someone needed support, in the versions of itself that were discarded because they weren't ready yet. Virgo went through those 20 years like someone polishing a surface that no one will see up close, but which needs to be perfect nonetheless. This has a name that Virgo rarely uses for itself: service, dedication. The almost compulsive ability to prioritize the quality of what is produced over the recognition received, to correct one's own work when no one asked, to carry the weight of what could be better when everyone has already called it good enough. That's what was deposited into the account. And here lies the crux of the matter, because Virgo doesn't see this as a deposit. Virgo sees it as an obligation, as a minimum standard, as the way things simply have to be done, not as something that deserves recognition, and much less as something the universe could repay with interest. And that's exactly where the illusion begins. Because if you don't recognize what you deposited, how will you recognize it when the return arrives? How will you know that May 9th and 10th are not ordinary days, that they are the moment when the universe finally stamped that account and said, paid off? There's something nobody tells you about how karma works specifically for Virgo, a mechanism that few truly understand. And it has everything to do with how Virgo carries what should only pass through. Saturn moves slowly, slower than any other planet visible to the naked eye. And that's exactly why its cycles are so difficult to recognize while you're in them. You don't notice the clock because the clock doesn't make noise. It just measures, silently, with the precision of someone who knows that time always arrives. And when it arrives for Virgo, what it brings with it is not a new debt. It's the closing of an account that has been open for much longer than Virgo can name. It was while searching for answers to this that I found this digital book, The Divine Path That Guides Your Zodiac Sign Towards a Life of Purpose. It's not a guide of predictions or ready-made formulas. It's a tool for deciphering how the specific nature of Virgo, with all its difficulties and extraordinary qualities, carries a purpose that goes far beyond what Virgo usually allows itself to believe. The book explores precisely the mechanisms that Virgo operates beneath the surface: service as identity, high standards as a language of love, silent surrender as a form of construction that no one recognizes, but which is real. It's the kind of reading that makes you stop in the middle of a page, look up, and realize that what always seemed like a flaw was, in fact, architecture. If you are here now, something has already shifted within you. You are processing it, recognizing a pattern that has been kept hidden for a long time without a name. And there is a very small window between the moment recognition happens and the moment the everyday mind reabsorbs everything back into routine. Don't let this window close before using it. The link is in the first pinned comment. But be aware, this content may be taken down. Click now and download your copy. Now tell me in the comments, what silent sacrifice have you made in the last 20 years that has never been recognized, not even by yourself? The Saturn cycle that matters to Virgo now began approximately 20 years ago, and what happened in that interval wasn't arbitrary, it was systematic. Every loss that seemed random, every new beginning that arrived unbidden, every moment when what had been built needed to be dismantled so that something more solid could be erected in its place. All of this was part of a logic that Virgo felt but never fully managed to name. The logic of someone paying a bill without having access to their own statement. There are milestones that Virgo remembers with an uncomfortable clarity. The relationship that ended when it seemed most established. The project that didn't go ahead despite everything invested in it. The opportunity that slipped through their fingers exactly when their fingers were trying to hold on tightest. These aren't coincidences. They are adjustment points, the moments when Saturn regulated what was out of alignment, preparing the ground for what would come next. And Virgo, at the center of each of these moments, did what it always does: analyzed, identified what could have been different, adjusted internally. It began again with slightly more precision, without visible drama, without public collapse, from within, where no one is watching. And here's what no one ever told you. This currency that Virgo uses to pay is not generic suffering. It's a very specific currency, much more valuable than it seems at first glance. Virgo uses self-criticism as an instrument of karmic payment. not as a metaphor, as a real mechanism operating with a consistency bordering on automatic. It works like this. Every time Virgo identifies an error in themselves before someone outside identifies it, every time they internalize the criticism before it comes from outside, every time they raise their own standard when they could stabilize, something is recorded, a portion is paid. A line in the cosmic ledger is filled with the precision of someone who is not being assisted by anyone, but works as if they were. And Virgo does this with a frequency bordering on the invisible. The criticism that no one asked for, but that came anyway. The standard that exhausted not only the people around you, but especially yourself. The inability to accept what is good enough when there is potentially better right there ahead. Each of these instances, which Virgo classifies as a character flaw, as excessive anxiety, as a lack of inner peace, each one is, in the language of karma, an installment paid in advance. The universe didn't need to collect. Virgo collected from itself first, and with interest. This completely changes the calculation of the debt. Think of a common debt you borrow. The creditor sets a term and an interest rate. But if the debtor, even before receiving the first payment, begins to deposit installments in advance, time and time again, over years, with interest that they themselves calculated so that no margin of error would escape, what happens to this debt? It shrinks faster than expected, and depending on how much was deposited, and Virgo deposited much, much more than any statement could show, the balance may not only reach zero, it may reverse. The debtor may become the creditor. This is the paradox of Virgo on May 9th and 10th, 2026. The discovery, disturbing, elegant, inevitable, that the account did not reach zero, that she crossed zero some time ago, and that what exists on the other side is not debt. It's credit. It's the universe indebted to Virgo. Not as a prize, not as a reward for good behavior, as a mathematical success, as the logical result of decades of systematic payment made by someone who never knew or never allowed themselves to believe that they were paying something that deserved to be returned with the same exactness with which it was paid. This discovery, that Virgo's self-criticism was, for 20 years, the very instrument for paying off karmic debt, is the kind of revelation that doesn't dissolve with time. It settles in, it stays, and it begins to silently reorganize how you see yourself. But recognizing the paradox is only the first step. What comes next? How Virgo transforms this discovery into a real foundation to build upon, instead of merely receiving it as fleeting relief, is what the digital book, The Divine Path, that guides your zodiac sign to a life of purpose, explores with the specificity of someone who understands how the Virgo mind processes the world, and how to transform what has always been seen as a burden into its greatest instrument of real discernment. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey towards the clarity and genius you deserve. There is a phenomenon that astrologers describe as a closing transit. It's not a single planet changing position. It's a configuration, an alignment of simultaneous movements that, when it happens, creates something like a cosmic window. A temporary opening during which certain resolutions become possible, certain accounts that have been left unfinished, certain patterns that needed an external catalyst to finally close. On May 9th and 10th, 2026, this window opened specifically for Virgo. Two movements overlap on these dates. The first is the activation of a sector of the natal chart that astrologers associate with accumulated karma. The sector that holds what has been silently carried, what has awaited resolution for entire cycles, what never had space to be fully processed in the rhythm of daily life. The second is a liberating aspect between planets that together govern both long-term structure and the capacity for profound transformation. When these two movements coincide, and they coincide on May 9th and 10th, the exact condition is created for what was recorded to finally be processed, acknowledged, closed with precision. It's not a coincidence. It's cosmic mechanics working at the precise moment for which it was calculated. And for Virgo, that precise moment arrived because the account reached the exact point of closure, not by chance. Because the volume of payment accumulated over 20 years, the installments in service, in self-criticism, in integrity operated without hearing, reached the necessary value. And not only that, it surpassed it. Think of the signature at the end of a contract that took 20 years to draft. Each clause was negotiated throughout life, sometimes painfully, sometimes so subtly that it seemed only the natural unfolding of things. Each refusal of a shortcut was a clause. Each night of work redone when it could have been delivered anyway was a clause. Each time care was given when one's own reserve was almost depleted was a clause. And now, on May 9th and 10th, the contract reaches its final page. The pen falls, the signature seals what has been built over decades, but a completed contract is not an emptiness. It is a liberation, and liberation demands something that Virgo doesn't usually do easily, knowing how to receive, knowing what to do with what has been released, because energy released without direction tends to return to the same old patterns, to the same known compulsions, to the uncomfortable comfort of what has been familiar for 20 years. What comes after the signature is the part that Virgo still needs to learn. This window of May 9th and 10th is not a date for passive contemplation. It's a real opening, and real openings require you to know what to go through and what you have in hand. The digital book, The Divine Path that guides your zodiac sign to a life of purpose, was conceived precisely for this moment of transition, when the cycle ends and the question ceases to be, "What should I do?" and becomes, "What do I build now?" It delivers the clarity that Virgo needs before any move, the compass for those about to cross a threshold and who don't want to arrive on the other side without knowing where they're going. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey towards the clarity and genius you deserve. Karmic recognition doesn't work like human recognition. When a human being recognizes you, they use words, gestures, presence. They look you in the eye and say, "I saw, I know what you did." And Virgo, who rarely asks for this kind of validation, but feels its absence almost physically, like a missing frequency, has learned over the years not to depend on this form of feedback. They've learned to function without an audience, to produce in the dark, to maintain the standard even when no one is watching, especially when no one is watching. And that's exactly what the universe recorded, not the sacrifices that were seen, the ones that weren't, not the work that received praise. What was done in total silence, without expectation, without negotiating anything in return. Because any sign can be whole when being observed. Real integrity, the kind that karma accounts for, is what happens when you could easily choose the easier path and don't. When you could lower the standard and don't. When you could get rid of the weight and decide to carry a little more. Virgo carried it, silently, repeatedly, for 20 years. And the universe didn't record the grand gestures. It recorded the small ones, the ones Virgo doesn't even remember anymore. The nights when work was redone when it could have been delivered as is. The times care was given when the person caring was at the limit of their own reserve, without anyone knowing. The moments when integrity was maintained, when it would have been much easier and much more humane to let it pass. It's like a manuscript someone wrote for years and kept in a drawer without showing it to anyone. Not because it wasn't worth anything, because it seemed not yet ready. And then one day, decades later, someone opens the drawer, reads it carefully, And what was written there, line by line, with all the imperfection and all the depth of someone who wrote without knowing they were creating something lasting, is recognized all at once, in its entirety. On May 9th and 10th, the universe opens the drawer, and what is written there is much more than Virgo ever allowed herself to believe she deserved, because Virgo is much more disciplined in underestimating herself than in recognizing herself. And karmic recognition doesn't ask permission to arrive. It arrives anyway, in the exact proportion of what has been accumulated over time. It's not a reward, it's balance. And balance for Virgo has a more precise name: foundation. The ground upon which the next cycle begins to be built. What the universe recognizes in Virgo is precisely what Virgo has the most difficulty recognizing in itself: the consistency that operates without an audience, the depth that doesn't need external validation to exist, the integrity that doesn't compromise even when negotiating would be more convenient. Understanding this dimension, not as a philosophical concept, but as a concrete reality that has shaped every choice of the last 20 years, is what transforms the karmic closure of a passive event into a real starting point. The digital book, The Divine Path That Guides Your Zodiac Sign Towards a Life of Purpose, was created precisely for this Virgo, the one crossing a threshold and needing a clear map of what has been accumulated and what can now be built. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey towards the clarity and genius you deserve. There's a feeling that few can accurately describe. It's the feeling of a weight you've carried for so long that you've begun to confuse it with part of your own body, and that suddenly is no longer there. It's not euphoria. It's not noisy celebration. It's something stranger and deeper than that. It's a strange lightness. The kind of lightness that makes you not know exactly what to do with your hands, that leaves a silence where there was constant tension, that makes life seem, for a few moments, slightly different, as if the filter through which you saw everything had been replaced by another, slightly cleaner, slightly clearer, not a dramatic transformation, a change of frequency. That's what Virgo will begin to feel after May 9th and 10th, not all at once. Karma doesn't close like a switch. It closes like a receding tide, slow, constant, perceptible only to those paying attention. But the direction changes, and when the direction changes, what was stagnant begins to flow. What was dammed up begins to find its way. What happens after a karmic closure? A construction begins. But a construction unlike anything Virgo has done before. Because before, something compromised the ground, the weight of still open cycles, of patterns that needed to be dissolved before the new could truly take hold. Now, the ground is clear, prepared with an accuracy that only decades of careful work produce. It's like an architect who can finally erect the structure they always imagined, not because they gained new land, because they spent years, silently, methodically, preparing what they already had, removing what was useless, reinforcing what needed a foundation, adjusting what seemed like a detail, but which, in the architecture of a life, makes all the difference when the moment to build finally arrives. And the moment has arrived. Not a life without difficulty, not a path without friction, but a different kind of obstacle, the kind that demands the best of Virgo instead of consuming what's left, the kind that tests the depth instead of wearing down the surface, the kind of challenge that, when overcome, leaves something concrete, real growth, grounded in real territory. Virgo always knew somehow that there was a before and an after. They always felt deep down, without being able to fully name it, that at some point something would reorganize, not from the outside in, from the inside out, an internal temperature shift that no one else notices, but that changes how everything is experienced from then on, how decisions are made, how boundaries are set, how care is distributed, including for oneself. That after has arrived. 20 years is a long time to carry something. It's a long time to pay installments you didn't see being deducted, to maintain a standard when no one valued it, to serve without recognition, to grow in silence while the world slept, but it's also exactly the time needed for such a debt to be settled, and not just settled, settled with a surplus. Virgo is not a sign of easy rewards. It never has been. It's a sign of process, of transformation that happens cell by cell, adjustment by adjustment, discarded version by more refined version. And that's why, when the universe finally gives back, it does so in a way only Virgo can recognize. Not with fanfare, but with precision. Not with fanfare, but with the silent accuracy of a mechanism that was well built and finally finds the moment to function in the opposite direction. On May 9th and 10th, 2026, something that has been in motion for 20 years finds its destination, not so that you stop, so that you can finally begin the way you always knew was possible, but only now have the groundwork to sustain. The universe has always listened to you, and the silence you sometimes interpreted as indifference was, in fact, the universe doing the math with the same care that Virgo has always done everything. Attention to detail, without haste, without room for error. The bill has arrived, and the balance is yours.